What's good, Founders? Welcome back to the channel where we break down the real deal behind the pixels. Today, we're diving deep into something that every Star Wars expert and lore master absolutely cannot afford to skip. And trust me, you won't catch this story unfolding on Disney Plus or in any official canon material. See, while Disney's been feeding us the same recycled storylines, Fortnite dropped something completely wild during their galactic battle season, an original Star Wars narrative that's more authentic to the rebellious spirit of what Star Wars actually represents than anything we've seen in years. And yo, before we blast off into hyperspace, if this content hits different and you're vibing with this fresh perspective, smash that subscribe button right now. I'm talking to you, Founder, because that's what you are when you join this community. You're not just a viewer, you're building something with me. And speaking of building, check out that membership button because we're creating something revolutionary here. A completely decentralized way of supporting independent content that doesn't bow down to corporate overlords. Remember that feeling when you first saw the Rebel Alliance taking on the Empire? That underdog energy? That fight against overwhelming odds? That wasn't just entertainment, that was inspiration coded in science fiction. And that's exactly what Fortnite captured when they dropped us into the middle of an Imperial invasion on Oninoshima. Picture this. Star destroyers hanging in the sky like steel mountains. Death Star looming in the distance like a mechanical moon of destruction. Rey and Emperor Palpatine appearing as holograms, recruiting fighters to their cause through rift gates. This isn't just some cash grab crossover, this is sci-fi storytelling that actually understands what made Star Wars special in the first place. But here's where it gets really interesting, and why every hardcore Star Wars fan needs to pay attention. This story takes place in an Asian-inspired setting. And there's way more connection between Star Wars and Asian culture than most people realize. I actually made a separate short breaking down those connections that's linked in the description. Bookmark that, because it'll blow your mind how deep those roots go. The Empire isn't just invading any random planet, they're invading Oninoshima, a place where ancient spirit realm portals connect to mystical forces that mirror the Force itself. This isn't coincidence, Founders. This is intentional world building that respects both the Eastern philosophical foundations of Star Wars and the innovative storytelling possibilities that only interactive media can provide. And yo, if you're already subscribed, major respect, but make sure you're coming back regularly because this channel is constantly evolving. Even if you're not familiar with all the Fortnite content, bookmark that Fortnite playlist in the description. I'm dropping lore breakdowns and gaming insights you literally won't find anywhere else on YouTube. So we've got Imperial forces establishing bases, Leia Organa recruiting loopers for secret missions, Mandalorian warriors arriving to investigate betrayal among their allies. This is the kind of complex, multi-layered storytelling that proves video games have evolved beyond simple entertainment into legitimate narrative art form. But here's what most people miss when they dismiss this as just another gaming crossover. This story is actually a perfect blueprint for understanding how decentralized resistance movements operate in the face of overwhelming institutional power. And that's where things get really interesting, because what happened in this digital rebellion mirrors something much bigger happening in our actual world right now. Alright, Founders, let's break down what actually went down in this digital galaxy far, far away, because this isn't just some random battle royale reskin. This is a masterclass in how power structures operate and how grassroots movements respond to institutional oppression. Phase 1. Imperial takeover. The Empire doesn't just show up guns blazing, they're strategic about it. Star destroyers position themselves in the skies above Oninoshima, while the Death Star maintains psychological pressure from deep space. Classic intimidation tactics, overwhelming display of force designed to break resistance before it even starts. But here's the key detail most players missed. Palpatine's hidden data entries reveal he's specifically interested in the junk scattered across the island. This isn't random conquest, this is resource extraction, colonial exploitation disguised as military operation. Sound familiar? Because this pattern plays out in every real-world scenario where powerful institutions move into communities they don't understand or respect. And yo, if this analysis is hitting different than your typical gaming content, drop a like on this video and share it with that friend who's always talking about Star Wars lore, or that hardcore Fortnite player who thinks they know everything about the storyline. Trust me, they need to see this perspective. Phase 2. The Pull of the Force. This is where Leia Organa demonstrates what real leadership looks like in resistance movements. She doesn't just react to Imperial aggression. She investigates, she gathers intelligence, she builds networks. When she recruits the Looper to infiltrate that secret Imperial cache in the mountains, that's not just a fetch quest, that's intelligence gathering, the foundation of any successful counter-movement. Notice how Luke Skywalker and Han Solo aren't just showing up as celebrity cameos, they're actively training and recruiting allies. Meanwhile, Chewbacca's battling stormtroopers on the ground level, and even Jar Jar Binks is providing morale support to clone troopers. This is Coalition Building 101. Every skill set matters, every contribution counts, from frontline combat to psychological support. Phase 3. Mandalorian Rising. Now this is where the storytelling gets really sophisticated, because the Mandalorians arrive with their own agenda that doesn't neatly fit into the Empire versus Rebellion binary. They're investigating betrayal within their own ranks, and discovering that their recent allies have sided with the Empire and are plotting to sell them out. This isn't just plot development, this is a perfect illustration of how power structures infiltrate and corrupt even the most independent communities. The Mandalorians represent that warrior culture that values honor and autonomy above everything else, but even they're vulnerable to internal corruption when institutional power offers the right incentives. Speaking of building independent communities, this is exactly why I'm developing this channel as a decentralized autonomous organization. When you become a channel member, you're not just supporting content creation. You're becoming a shareholder in a completely new model of media that doesn't depend on corporate sponsorships or algorithmic manipulation. From founder to funder, that's the evolution we're building together. Phase 4. Star Destroyer Bombardment. The Empire's response to growing resistance? Escalate the violence. They send a lone Star Destroyer directly above the island to bombard civilian areas and reduce them to rubble. This isn't military strategy. This is terrorism designed to demoralize the population and demonstrate the cost of resistance. But watch how Leia responds. Instead of being intimidated, she uses this display of Imperial brutality to finalize plans for taking the battle directly to the Death Star. This is how authentic resistance movements operate. They use the oppressor's own excessive force as motivation and recruitment tool. Phase 5. Death Star Sabotage. This is where everything comes together, and where the storytelling reaches levels that honestly put most recent Star Wars movies to shame. We're not just watching heroes succeed through individual heroics. We're seeing coordinated resistance networks execute complex operations that require multiple skill sets and massive personal sacrifice. And before we dive into that final assault, let me tell you about something most content creators won't mention. If you don't skip the ads on this video, you're literally supporting independent media creation for free. Every ad you watch is equivalent to sending me a direct donation, which means I can keep creating content that challenges conventional gaming narratives without selling out to corporate gaming sponsors pushing their latest cash grab. But here's where this digital rebellion teaches us something crucial about real-world resistance movements and why science fiction and fantasy aren't just entertainment, they're training simulations for our imagination. So we've seen the problem, TS centralized power structures, exploiting resources and communities they don't understand or respect. But here's where this Fortnite storyline gets revolutionary: founders. Because it doesn't just show us the problem, it demonstrates the solution through interactive storytelling that lets us actually experience effective resistance tactics. See, what makes science fiction and fantasy so powerful isn't just the escapism, it's that these genres tickle our creativity and exercise our brains in ways that prepare us for real-world challenges. When you're piloting an X-Wing through asteroid fields to take down Imperial shield generators, you're not just playing a game, you're training your mind to think tactically about asymmetric warfare against overwhelming odds. And yo, drop a comment right now. Tell me about a time when a sci-fi or fantasy story changed how you think about real-world problems. Because that's the power we're talking about here, and I want to hear how this resonates with the founder community we're building. Look at how the Death Star sabotage operation actually worked. Jones and Hope didn't succeed through individual heroics or chosen one mythology. They succeeded through decentralized network coordination. Multiple small teams with specialized skills, horizontal communication structures, adaptive planning that could respond to changing conditions in real time. When they disguise themselves as stormtroopers and prisoners to infiltrate the space station, that's classic resistance methodology, using the oppressor's own systems and assumptions against them. When they rendezvoused at the armory to arm themselves with E-11 blasters and DLT-19 blaster rifles, that's community defense organizing, ensuring everyone has access to the tools they need for collective protection. But here's what most people miss about this storyline. It's not just about fighting the Empire, it's about building alternative structures that make the Empire irrelevant. The rebellion isn't trying to become the new Empire, they're trying to create conditions where no Empire can exist. Notice how the Mandalorians operate. They don't have a centralized government or hierarchical command structure. Part L. They have a culture of mutual aid and collective decision-making based on shared values and traditions. When they discover betrayal in their ranks, they don't purge dissidents or consolidate power. They consider working with new associates, expanding their network of autonomous cooperation. Speaking of mutual aid and collective support, if this analysis is providing value that you can't find anywhere else on YouTube, consider hitting that super thanks button. It's like dropping a tip for independent media that's actually challenging conventional narratives instead of just recycling corporate talking points. This is why I'm so passionate about covering Fortnite lore that goes way deeper than surface-level gameplay content. Most gaming channels just cover weapon stats and victory strategies, but games like this are actually simulating complex social and political dynamics that can teach us how to organize effectively in the real world. When Blue Squadron coordinates that bombing run that compromises the Death Star, they're demonstrating how decentralized autonomous organizations can achieve objectives that traditional hierarchical structures can't even attempt. No single point of failure, distributed leadership, adaptive tactics based on real-time information sharing. And when Emperor Palpatine confronts Jones and the Loopers in that final sequence, deflecting blaster fire using Force lightning, throwing TIE fighters at them, that's not just boss battle mechanics. That's a perfect metaphor for how centralized power responds when decentralized networks threaten their control. Overwhelming force, psychological intimidation, divide and conquer tactics, designed to break solidarity. But watch what happens next. Hope arrives with a rift to go and throws it at Palpatine's Force lightning, rifting the entire team back above the island just as Blue Squadron torpedoes the Death Star into oblivion. That's not individual heroism, that's collective action coordinated across multiple fronts with perfect timing. The resulting explosion sends debris hurling toward the island's surface, and when one meteor strikes a spirit realm portal, it creates a beam protruding up into the sky and a shockwave that knocks everyone out. But here's the thing. That's not destruction, that's transformation. The collision between Imperial technology and ancient mystical forces creates something entirely new. And that transformation is exactly what we're exploring throughout this channel's Fortnite playlist. I'm breaking down lore connections and gaming insights that you literally won't find anywhere else on YouTube. Make sure you bookmark that playlist and help the community upvote the most valuable content, because we're building something here that serves everyone's interests instead of just corporate algorithms. So, we've seen how decentralized resistance networks can challenge institutional power structures through coordinated action and mutual aid. But what are the actual benefits of organizing this way? And why should you care about applying these principles in your own life? Alright, founders, so we've broken down the problem and explored the solution. Now let's talk about why this actually matters for your life. Because when you understand how decentralized networks operate, you gain advantages that centralized systems literally cannot provide. First benefit. Resilience. Look at what happened when that TIE fighter crashed and separated Hope from the rest of the team during the Death Star infiltration. In a traditional hierarchical structure, losing communication with command would mean mission failure. But because this was a decentralized network operation, Hope could make autonomous decisions that kept the entire mission on track. This is exactly how I'm building this channel community. When you become a member and join our decentralized autonomous organization, you're not just a passive consumer waiting for me to tell you what to think. You're an active participant who can contribute ideas, influence direction, and benefit directly from the community's success. And that's why I keep emphasizing this membership opportunity, because this isn't just about supporting content creation. This is about building a completely new model where founders become funders and funders become stakeholders in something that grows based on collective intelligence rather than corporate algorithms. Second benefit, adaptability. Notice how the Mandalorians responded when they discovered their allies had betrayed them to the Empire. They didn't waste time on bureaucratic procedures or loyalty tests. They immediately started considering new partnerships. That's the advantage of horizontal organization. You can pivot quickly based on changing conditions because you're not locked into rigid hierarchies. In gaming terms, think about how this applies to competitive play. The best squads aren't the ones with the most skilled individual players, they're the ones where everyone can adapt their role based on what the situation requires. Same principle applies to community organizing, business innovation, even personal relationships. Speaking of competitive gaming, this is exactly why I focus on developing the esports community in GTA and expanding knowledge for ordinary players. I want every founder to have the same advantages as those sweaty players you see dominating TikTok compilations. When you understand the underlying principles, instead of just memorizing specific tactics, you can handle any situation, even when some griefer tries to mess with you. Third benefit, creative problem solving. When Emperor Palpatine used Force lightning against the infiltration team, Hope didn't try to fight him on his terms. She threw a rift to go at the lightning itself, turning his own attack into their escape route. That's the kind of innovative thinking that emerges when people aren't constrained by traditional command structures. This is why science fiction and fantasy are so crucial for developing our mental capabilities. These genres don't just entertain us, they train our brains to see possibilities that conventional thinking can't access. When you regularly engage with stories about alternative ways of organizing society, you become better at identifying creative solutions in your own life. Fourth benefit: authentic autonomy. The spirit realm portals in this storyline aren't just mystical plot devices, they represent connection to something deeper than material power structures. When that Death Star debris hits the portal and creates that beam shooting up into the sky, that's symbolic of what happens when ancient wisdom meets innovative resistance. You don't have to choose between honoring traditional values and embracing new possibilities. Decentralized networks can preserve cultural identity while adapting to contemporary challenges. The Mandalorians maintain their warrior traditions while forming new alliances. The Rebels use advanced technology while staying connected to the Force. Drop a comment and tell me, what's one area of your life where you'd benefit from more autonomy and less dependence on centralized authority? Because recognizing those opportunities is the first step toward building the kind of resilience we're seeing in this storyline. Fifth benefit: economic independence. This is why I'm so grateful when founders choose not to skip ads, because that honest earning model means I can create content based on what serves the community instead of what serves corporate sponsors. Every ad view is equivalent to a direct donation that keeps this analysis completely independent from gaming industry influence. When you support decentralized media creation, you're investing in information that challenges conventional narratives instead of reinforcing them. That's the kind of economic organizing that actually builds long-term value for everyone involved. But here's the biggest benefit of all, and this is where the Fortnite Star Wars storyline really shines. When you operate through decentralized networks, you don't just resist oppression, you make oppression obsolete. The goal isn't to defeat the Empire so you can become the new Empire. The goal is to create conditions where empires can't function because communities are too resilient, too adaptive, too connected to their own power. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this perspective. That Star Wars fan who's disappointed with recent movies, that Fortnite player who thinks they understand the lore, that friend who's looking for alternatives to traditional political and economic systems. Because these ideas only work when they spread through authentic community networks. So, we've explored the problems, examined the solutions, and analyzed the benefits. But now comes the most important question: what are you actually going to do with this information? So here we are, founders. We've dissected the imperial power structures, analyzed the resistance networks, explored the benefits of decentralized organization, and connected it all through a Fortnite storyline that honestly provides better political education than most university courses. But analysis without action is just entertainment. And you didn't stick around for 18 minutes of deep dive content because you want to stay entertained. You're here because something in your life needs to change. So let me ask you straight up, what are you going to do about it now? Are you going to close this video and go back to scrolling through the same corporate-sponsored content that keeps you thinking in the same limiting patterns? Or are you ready to start building something different? Start small, start local, start digital. If you learned something valuable from this analysis, hit that subscribe button right now, not just because I asked you to, but because you're making a conscious choice to support independent media that challenges conventional narratives. When you become a channel member, you're not just supporting content creation, you're participating in a practical experiment in decentralized autonomous organization. From founder to funder to stakeholder in a community that operates on mutual aid principles instead of extractive corporate models. But don't stop there. Take these principles into your gaming communities. When you're building squads in Fortnite, GTA, or any competitive environment, practice horizontal leadership. Share knowledge instead of hoarding it. Support other players instead of trying to dominate them. Create networks of mutual support that make everyone stronger. Take it into your actual community. Look for opportunities to organize around shared interests instead of waiting for institutions to solve problems for you. Whether that's neighborhood mutual aid, creative collaboration, skill-sharing networks, or just friend groups that actually support each other's growth instead of reinforcing each other's limitations. Drop a comment right now and commit to one specific action you're going to take based on this analysis. Make it public, make it accountable. Because when you declare your intentions to a community of like-minded founders, you're more likely to follow through. Share this video with someone who needs this perspective, not because I need the views, though I appreciate the support, but because these ideas only work when they spread through authentic community networks. That Star Wars fan who's hungry for deeper meaning, that gamer who's tired of toxic competitive culture, that friend who's looking for alternatives to traditional political and economic systems. If this content provided value you can't find anywhere else, show appreciation through super thanks, because supporting independent creators who aren't beholden to corporate sponsors is itself a form of decentralized economic organizing. The Spirit Realm portal that got struck by Death Star debris in this storyline? That beam shooting up into the sky represents what happens when ancient wisdom meets innovative resistance. You have access to both traditional knowledge and cutting-edge tools for community organizing. The question is whether you're going to use them. The Empire always looks overwhelming until communities start working together. The Death Star always seems invincible until coordinated networks execute precise actions at exactly the right moment. The system always appears permanent until people stop waiting for permission and start building alternatives. So subscribe if you haven't already. Become a founder in a community that's actually building something. Join the membership if you're ready to become a funder in decentralized media creation. Like this video if it challenged your thinking. Comment with your commitment to action. Share it with someone who needs this energy. And remember, bookmark that Fortnite playlist because we're constantly dropping lore analysis and gaming insights that connect digital worlds to real-world organizing principles. Help the community upvote the most valuable content so we're building something that serves everyone's interests. The rebellion starts now, founders. Not in a galaxy far, far away. Right here, right now, with the choices you make after closing this video. What are you going to do about it now? May the Force be with you. And may your actions be guided by the wisdom of decentralized networks that make oppression obsolete instead of just changing who's in charge. Peace, founders. See you in the next one.